My family. Thought I drowned that night. Then I walked into their family meeting. My name is Deja Calloway, and I am 34 years old. 8 months ago, my family held a meeting to divide my belongings.
Let's decide who gets what.
I'll take Grandma Essie's pearls.
They thought I was dead. They were wrong. I can still hear Aunt Rochelle laughing when she claimed my grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones Grandma Essie pressed into my palm the week before she died and told me to wear on the day I finally decided I deserved something good. I can still see my mother, Lorraine, sitting at the head of the table I grew up eating Sunday dinner at, holding a legal pad with my name written at the top like a title on an auction sheet. They had my furniture divided, my savings account flagged, and my storage unit assigned to my cousin Brianna before they even confirmed a body. But they didn't know one thing. I was sitting in a rental car 2 blocks away, watching the lights in that house go on and off through the window like a signal I'd spent 34 years waiting to understand. What happened inside that house when I walked through the door, and what I'd already put into motion before my foot hit that welcome mat, is why I'm telling you this story. Welcome to Rewritten Secret Stories, the channel where the women written out of their own lives finally get to pick up the pen. If stories about truth, survival, and the kind of quiet that comes after you stop begging to be loved correctly, speak to you, drop a comment and subscribe, because this one does not have a gentle ending. Let me tell you exactly how a family decides you're worth more gone than present. It doesn't happen overnight. It arrives slowly, the way mold grows in places you forget to check until the damage is structural. I was 12 when my mother introduced me to someone at church as her daughter, the responsible one, in a tone that made responsibility sound like a diagnosis. My father, Raymond, left when I was 9. Not dramatically, not with a fight worth remembering, just a Tuesday morning when his car was in the driveway and a Wednesday morning when it wasn't. My mother never recovered in the way that actually moves a person forward. She recovered by turning grief into a grievance she collected interest on for the next 2 decades. I was the oldest of 3. My brother Damon was 2 years younger and treated the world like it owed him entertainment. My sister Portia was 4 years younger and had perfected the skill of crying at exactly the right moment to make any room reorganize itself around her comfort. I loved them both the way you love people you were assigned to, rather than chose, deeply, and with an exhaustion that never fully lifted. By 16, I was cooking dinner 4 nights a week, helping Damon with homework he could have done himself, and sitting with Portia through nightmares she outgrew at 12, but kept performing because the attention felt good. My mother worked second shift at the hospital as a billing coordinator, so the house ran on my schedule, not hers. Nobody called it labor. They called it Deja being Deja. I earned a scholarship to a state university 3 hours away. My mother cried when I told her, but not the proud kind. The kind that came out sideways with sighs and little comments about how she guessed she'd have to figure things out without me. I went anyway. I worked 20 hours a week at the campus library and another 10 at a cafe downtown. I graduated in 4 years with a degree in finance and a job offer from a wealth management firm in Atlanta. It started me at $52,000 a year, an impossible number for someone who had learned to make one meal stretch across 3 days. I cried in my car after signing the offer letter and told myself that cry would be the last one I spent wondering whether I'd done enough. I was wrong. The call started my 2nd month in Atlanta. Not the catching up kind, not the proud kind, the inventory kind. Damon needed his car insurance covered for 3 months because his license had been suspended and he still needed to get to work. Just until I get back on my feet, Deja. You know, I would do the same. I sent the money. Portia needed a deposit on an apartment because her boyfriend had turned out to be exactly who everyone except Portia had seen coming. My mother needed her refrigerator replaced because the old one had finally quit. Then the church roof fund was short, and my mother had already told the deacon board that her daughter in Atlanta, the one in finance, would close the gap. I kept a spreadsheet, not because I'm cold, because I'm precise, and numbers were the only record of the truth my family consistently tried to rewrite. Over 6 years, I sent home $230,000, not in one dramatic sum. In steady, quiet increments I told myself were investments in the people I came from. I never called it a loan because I wasn't naive enough to believe that word meant anything to people who had already reframed my childhood as a debt I owed them. The shift happened when I stopped being someone who gave and became someone who had something worth taking. At 31, I bought a condo in Atlanta, 2 bedrooms, a small balcony, a kitchen I'd spent 4 months imagining. I sent my mother photos. 3 hours later, she asked if the guest room would be ready when she visited. I got promoted to senior associate, and Damon called to congratulate me. Then, in the same breath, he mentioned a food truck he could really make work if he had startup capital. Portia asked me to co-sign a car loan. I said no. She didn't speak to me for 47 days, then called on my birthday like the silence had been weather rather than punishment. The final straw came on a Sunday in November. I'd been working a 70-hour week on a portfolio transition for our largest client when my phone rang at 11 at night. My mother, not to check on me. She had that particular quietness I'd learned meant she was building towards something. Damon's landlord had filed eviction proceedings. Damon needed first and last month's rent plus the overdue balance, $4,100. She'd already told Damon I would take care of it. Not that she hoped I might, not that she wanted to ask. She'd already told him. I said no. The silence wasn't surprised. It was strategic. She let it breathe. Then she said, "After everything this family has done to hold things together." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The unfinished sentence was the sentence. I was the thing they'd been holding together around. The support beam they'd quietly relied on while telling themselves they'd built everything on their own. "I cannot keep doing this," I said. "I don't know who taught you that your family was optional," she said. We hung up with the kind of careful politeness more violent than screaming. 3 weeks later, Damon told my cousin Brianna that I'd changed. Brianna told Aunt Rochelle. Aunt Rochelle told the family group chat, which I was still in and watched silently, like whether I couldn't stop. By Christmas, I was receiving forwarded prayer requests with my name embedded in them, vague references to family members who had lost their way and chosen money over blood. My mother began referring to me in the past tense at family functions I wasn't invited to, but heard about secondhand. She talked about me like someone who had moved away to somewhere unfortunate. I stopped going home in January. By March, Damon had filed a report with the family, which, in my family, meant he'd called everyone on the contact list and delivered a version of events so rearranged that I was unrecognizable inside it. According to Damon, I'd cut them off without explanation. According to Portia, I'd become someone who looked down on where I came from. According to my mother, I'd simply vanished, the way people vanish when success convinces them they're better than their blood. Not one account included the $230,000. Not one included my name on Damon's electric bills, Portia's deposit, the church roof, school fees, or medical bills. The money had been absorbed so completely into their lives that removing it from the story required no visible effort. In May, I drove back to the city for a work conference and didn't tell anyone. I needed to understand what the story had become before deciding what to do about it. What I found was worse. Through a friend of a friend, I learned my family had been telling people I'd suffered some kind of breakdown. Atlanta had gotten to me. I'd stopped being myself. My mother had been accepting sympathy at church for a daughter who was still alive, employed, completely fine, living 3 hours away and going to work every morning in a blazer that cost more than my first month's rent. That was when I understood this wasn't going to resolve itself quietly. I took a week off work in September. I told my firm I had a family matter to handle. That was true in the most precise sense of the phrase. I hired a financial investigator named Carol Briggs, a woman who had spent 15 years as a fraud analyst for a regional bank and had the energy of someone who'd stopped being surprised by anything while remaining interested in everything. I slid a folder across her desk with 7 names. "I need a full financial picture on each of these people," I told her. "Assets, liabilities, anything that doesn't line up." She looked at the list, then at me. "Is this a legal matter?" "It will be," I said. What Carol found wasn't shocking in the dramatic sense. It was worse. It confirmed the fear I'd been too kind to name. Damon had been filing amended tax returns claiming dependents he didn't have, collecting refunds that belonged to no one in his household. Portia's boyfriend, introduced to the family as a contractor, was operating a business with a fraudulent license. He'd been cited twice by the city and paid neither fine. My mother was listed as a co-signer on 3 loans she hadn't disclosed when she applied for a home equity line of credit the previous year. Aunt Rochelle, the loudest voice in the family about my absence, had an outstanding civil judgment from a former business partner she'd hidden for 4 years. They weren't masterminds. They were people who had gotten away with small dishonesties for so long they'd stopped distinguishing between what was real and what was convenient. I spent 3 weeks setting the groundwork. Then I heard about the family meeting. My cousin Marcus, the only one who'd quietly maintained a relationship with me through text, sent me a message on a Thursday night. He didn't explain much. He just said there was going to be a gathering at my mother's house Sunday evening to go through some of your things that are still in storage. He thought I should know. I stared at that message for a long time. My things in storage were 2 boxes I'd left at my mother's house years ago. Books, a few photographs, my grandmother Essie's quilt. The idea that my family was convening to divide those items meant they'd collectively agreed, without confirming it with anyone who might tell me, that I wasn't coming back, that whatever version of my disappearance they'd constructed had become official enough to act on. I want you to understand what that felt like. The people who raised you had held a funeral for you without the courtesy of your absence. I booked a rental car and drove up Saturday. I checked into a motel 12 minutes from my mother's house and spent Saturday evening making phone calls. The IRS tip line, the city licensing board, the credit bureau fraud division. I didn't make accusations. I submitted documentation. There is a difference between burning something down and removing what was keeping it from the fire it had already built around itself. Sunday evening, I parked 2 blocks away at 6:45. The meeting was scheduled for 7. I watched cars arrive. Damon's truck, Portia's sedan, Aunt Rochelle's minivan with the dent in the passenger door she'd meant to fix for 3 years. My mother's porch light was on. Through the front window, I could see people settling in, the body language of a gathering that believed itself private. I gave them 20 minutes. Then I walked up to that front door at 7:23 and knocked 3 times. The same way Grandma Essie always knocked, 2 quick, 1 slow, like punctuation. My mother opened the door. The sound she made wasn't a word. It was the sound of a story losing its ending. She stood there with her hand on the knob as her face moved through 4 or 5 versions of itself before settling on something, trying very hard to look like joy and landing closer to cornered. Deja. Her voice came out small in a way I'd never heard before. Baby? I am not your baby right now, I said. But I am here. Can I come in? She stepped back. I walked into my mother's living room and every person inside went still, the particular stillness of a room that knows it has been caught. Damon had my grandmother's photograph in his hand. Aunt Rochelle had the pearl earrings in a small dish in her lap. Portia sat on the couch with her legs pulled under her, mouth open, no sound coming out. Marcus stood near the bookshelf. He gave me the smallest nod, then looked at the floor. On the coffee table was the legal pad. My name was at the top. Nobody spoke. Then Damon said, "We thought you were gone." I pulled a chair from the dining table, carried it into the living room, and sat. "I know what you thought," I said. "I need you all to know what I know." I'd printed Carol's summary report. Not the full documentation, just 2 clean, formatted pages, the way I format everything I intend to be taken seriously. I set 7 copies on the coffee table beside the legal pad with my name on it. Nobody moved. "Take one," I said. "This is for each of you." Aunt Rochelle spoke first. "Deja, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is a family gathering and you can't just—" "I'm family," I said, "unless the legal pad says otherwise. Take one." The room moved slowly. Papers were picked up. Pages turned. I watched my mother's face as she read. Then she reached the section about the home equity line. Her expression flattened into something I'd never seen before. "What is this?" she asked. "It is a financial summary," I said, "of the people in this room, prepared by a licensed investigator. I have full documentation in Charlotte with my attorney, who has already been briefed." "You have an attorney?" Portia asked. "I have had an attorney for 6 weeks." Damon set his paper down like it had burned him. "Deja, whatever you think you have there—" "I don't think anything," I said. "I know." I looked around the room. And what I know is that while I was sending $230,000 into this family over 6 years, keeping lights on, paying deposits, covering insurance, funding church roofs, school fees, and medical bills, every person in this room was building a version of me in your heads that had nothing to do with who I actually am. And when I stopped, when I said I needed what I was earning for myself, you held a funeral for me, without a body. While I was alive, working, and completely fine 3 hours away, my mother said, "Deja, we were worried about you." "You were dividing my grandmother's earrings, Mama." The room went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator in the kitchen. "That is not—" she started. I watched you pull up through the window, Marcus said quietly from the corner. I watched you park down the street, and I thought about calling you. I should have called you a long time before tonight. Nobody responded. I looked at my mother. I am not here to destroy this family, I said. I want to be honest about that. I am here because I refuse to be a story you tell without my participation. I am here because someone in this room has my grandmother's quilt in a box they were about to take home, and I want it back. And I am here because every tip I submitted to every relevant authority in the past 72 hours has my name attached to it. Which means if anyone in this room decides the correct response to this conversation is to make my life difficult, the documentation that currently exists only in summary form will become considerably more detailed and considerably more official. Damon stood. You reported us. I submitted factual documentation of financial irregularities I became aware of during an investigation into my own family's treatment of me. I said, that is a different sentence than what you just said. That is the same thing. Sit down, Damon. He sat. I didn't fully understand why, but he did. Portia was crying. Not the performative crying I'd watched her deploy for 20 years. The other kind. The kind that comes when someone finally understands the distance between what they thought was true and what is. Her mascara ran in 2 straight lines and she did nothing about it. I reached into my bag and set one more document on the table. It was a letter from my attorney outlining what full cooperation with the financial review process would look like for each family member, and what full non-cooperation would look like. I'd discussed both options with him. He'd been clear that cooperation was considerably more comfortable than the alternative. I'm not asking for the money back, I said. I'm not asking for apologies tonight, because an apology given under these circumstances isn't worth the breath it travels on. What I am asking is that everyone in this room read that letter before they leave tonight and contact my attorney's office by Friday with their intentions. My mother put her face in her hands. I went to the corner where I knew my 2 boxes were stacked. I'd put them there 8 years ago. They hadn't moved. That told me something about how certain my family had been that I'd always come back for them, that I was always findable when they needed me. I picked up the top box. Marcus crossed the room and picked up the other. We walked out together without speaking. At the door, I turned around once. Aunt Rochelle. She looked at me. The earrings. She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she reached into the dish in her lap and held them out. I walked back across the room, took them from her hand, and put them in my jacket pocket. I could feel their small weight against my ribs for the rest of the night. Thank you. That was all I said. Marcus helped me load both boxes into my rental car. Then, he stood in the street with his hands in his pockets. I am sorry I didn't call sooner, he said. You called when it counted, I told him. That means something. He nodded. What happens now? I told him the truth. Now the people who have to make decisions make them. I go back to Atlanta, keep building what I've been building, and stop funding the story they wanted to tell about me. He asked if he could stay in touch. I said yes. Some relationships inside a broken structure are still worth preserving. You just have to be careful which ones. And honest about why. I drove back to the motel with my grandmother's quilt on the back seat. I sat in the parking lot for a while before going inside. Not because I was sad exactly, because I understood I'd just done something irreversible in the way only honest things are irreversible. You cannot unsay a true thing. You cannot unshow people what you know. You cannot walk back into a room after you've turned on the lights and ask everyone to pretend it was still dark. The attorney calls came the following week. Damon's first through his own lawyer requesting a cooperation agreement, then Portia's, directly, not through counsel, which told me she hadn't retained anyone and was probably hoping the personal connection would soften what was coming. I had my attorney handle both responses. My mother called my cell on a Wednesday afternoon. I answered because I'd decided I wouldn't spend what came next refusing to hear her. I don't know how we got here, she said. I can tell you exactly how if you want. It would take about 34 years, and I'd need you to actually listen. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I thought you had given up on us. I gave you $230,000, Mama. That is not what giving up looks like. She started crying, the real kind. I could hear the difference because I'd been listening to her cry for 34 years. I don't need you to agree with everything I did this week, I said. I need you to tell me honestly whether you understand what happened on that dock. Not the dock at a lake, not a dramatic scene, The dock she'd built in her mind where I became someone she could inventory instead of someone she was supposed to know. She said, "I got so used to you handling things." I know. Stopped feeling like I was taking and started feeling like that was just how things were. I know that too. But knowing it and continuing anyway is still a choice, Mama. She had no answer. I didn't wait for one. The process took 4 months. Damon entered into a repayment agreement with the IRS on the amended returns. Portia's boyfriend lost his contractor's license, and she quietly stopped dating him, which I heard about through Marcus. Aunt Rochelle finally settled the civil judgment that had followed her for 4 years because Carol's summary had made ignoring it impossible to treat as a viable strategy. My mother worked with her bank to restructure the home equity situation. Nobody went to prison. That had never been the goal. The goal was precision. I wanted every person in that room to understand that there were records of everything, that the records had a keeper, and that the keeper was someone they'd badly miscalculated. 6 months after the meeting, Portia called me on a Sunday afternoon, not to ask for anything. She said she'd been in therapy for 3 months. Her therapist had asked her to list the relationships she'd damaged through patterns of learned helplessness. My name appeared at the top within the first session. She wasn't calling to ask forgiveness. She was calling to say she was working on it and wanted me to know. "I appreciate you telling me," I said. I didn't say we were fine. We weren't. We were at the beginning of a very long road that might or might not lead somewhere either of us could live with. That was an honest place to start, and I'd decided I preferred honest starting places to comfortable lies. My mother and I talk every other Sunday. Short calls, 20 minutes, factual. How is work? How is the weather? Did you eat something real today? It's not what I wanted a mother to be, and it's not nothing. I'm learning to hold both without forcing them into one simpler feeling. My grandmother's quilt is on the bed in my guest room. The pearl earrings sit in a small dish on my dresser where I can see them each morning. I wore them to a work dinner 3 weeks ago. A colleague told me they were beautiful. I said thank you and told her they were my grandmother's. For the first time in a long time, the sentence was only about my grandmother, not everything that came after. Marcus comes to Atlanta twice a year now. We have dinner and don't spend the whole time talking about the family, which is remarkable considering how much time we spent inside it. He's building something of his own now. A small landscaping company, legitimate, licensed, nothing that needs to be hidden in the paperwork. I told him I wouldn't invest, but I would advise. He said that was more than fair. My firm promoted me to partner in February. I stood in my office afterward looking out at the city and thought about my mother saying I'd given up on my family. I thought about Damon holding my grandmother's photograph like it was already his. I thought about the legal pad on the coffee table with my name written across the top. And I thought about the version of me who used to send money home every month, call it love, and wonder why it never made anything better. I am not bitter. I want to say that plainly because bitter is what people expect from a story like this. What I actually feel is closer to clarity. The lightness of putting down something so heavy that you forget you were carrying it until you straighten up and realize your back has stopped hurting. They set me free when they decided I was gone. They handed me the evidence. They gave me the 72 hours I needed. And they sat around a table confirming what I'd spent 6 years trying not to fully believe. Some families raise you. Some families reveal themselves, the ones that do both at the same time, even involuntarily, even from the wrong side of a window on a Sunday evening when they think you're somewhere far away and finished, are the families that finally teach you what you were made of all along. The woman who knocked on that door has nothing left to prove. She never did. She just had to stop waiting for the people who were supposed to tell her so. Now I want to hear from you. Did Deja go too far or not far enough? Could you have walked away quietly, or would you have walked into that room the same way she did? Tell me exactly where you fall in the comments, and if this story reminded you of something you've been carrying around without a name for it, send it to someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and ring that bell, because every story on this channel belongs to someone who refused to stay in the version of themselves that someone else wrote. I will see you in the next one.